All right, tonight we're talking about family relationships and roles and how just relationships change as a person gets more and more addicted and what happens to the people around them as well. Okay, so, and why, just because we get into recovery, that the people in our lives don't necessarily come along for the ride. Because if you're the person acting out by either getting arrested, becoming the addict, whatever, it's real easy to keep the focus on you. Right? Because we get labeled as the problem in the relationship. Okay, the problem is that people maybe want you to stop drinking and using and causing problems. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to want to change. Okay, and I've been a therapist for a long time and I've done a lot of couples counseling. I don't know if you know this or not, but most therapists hate doing couples or marriage counseling. Absolutely hate it. They'd rather do any other kind of counseling than do marriage counseling, because most of them don't understand that, like, when people come in for therapy, a couple comes in, there's usually one person that's there just to say they did it. They're really already checked out. They don't even want to come in, okay? And the other person desperately doesn't want the other person to leave. And when I was a baby therapist and just starting out, I had a really great supervisor. She was watching me one time with a married couple, and she said, "Why are you working so hard? You're setting yourself up for failure." And I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "You're assuming that both these people want to be here." And I was like, "Well, they're here in my office." And she says, "Yeah, Chris, one person's there just to say they did it, and then they're just going to bolt as soon as, because then they don't look like the bad guy, right? Well, I tried, but it didn't work. And the other person just doesn't want the other person to go." She said, "But the person that doesn't want the other person to go doesn't necessarily want to change either." See, I always assumed that the person that was like, let's be here, let's do the work, actually wanted to change. But most of the time, they just wanted the other person to stop doing whatever they were doing and to make them happy, which is not anybody else's job in this world but ours, right? Like, people can't make you happy. They can affect your serenity by the choices they make, but nobody's responsible for your happiness or our happiness. So they would always be, and she said, "You're setting it up so that, like, if you're on the side of the person that really wants, to engage in therapy, then the other person goes, uh-oh, look, they're both against me, and I'm not going to get heard here." So she said, "Ask this one question: who's here just to say they did it, and who doesn't want the other person to go?" I said, "You can't ask people that. That's rude, man." She says, "No, they'll tell you. They will always tell you, and they do." And I asked the question wrong the first time. I said, "Who's here that say they did it and really doesn't want to be here? And who's here because they really want this relationship to work and they want to change?" And she said, You asked the wrong question. The question is, who's here just to say they did it and really wants to go, and who's here because they don't want the other person to go? It doesn't mean they want to change. And usually the person that doesn't want the other person to go is the most dishonest person in that relationship. Because the person that just wants to go, at least they're being honest, right? "Screw you, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm out, I'm done." And the other person isn't saying, "Well, I really don't want you to go because I don't want to look at myself. If you hang around, I don't have to look at me. And I don't have to grow up." Okay? And that's, I found to be true 99% of the time when I was doing couples counseling. And as soon as I remember the first time I asked somebody, the guy said, "It's me, I'm out. I'm just here to say I did it, man. I'm tired of her. She's driving me crazy. I just want to get the hell out," right? And she's like, "Please don't go. I just don't want him to go. I don't want him to whatever, And every person told me, every couple, and there was just pretty cut and dry, okay? And most people don't even come in for treatment until, do you know what it finally makes people leave? It's like one person saying they're going to leave, but it's usually when the sex stops. That's when, because people can still have sex, right? And not like each other. Like, I've had couples say, "Chris, how come we can have freaky great sex, but we can't talk afterwards?" I said, "Well, when you're having sex, are you really talking about the laundry? Who's got to pick up the kids, the bills, what's going on?" Okay, that's like drinking together. okay, when you're having sex, because you're not really talking about the business of the relationship. It's a great distraction, and there's a little reward at the end, right? Okay, so they're like, ah, but as soon as the sex stops, man, that's usually when somebody comes in. Okay, so here's what happens as a person gets more. I don't know if you can see. We don't have a really good easel here, so if you need to like be able to see this a little better, here's what happens in an addicted family. Okay, or I don't like the word dysfunctional family. Have you heard that phrase, like dysfunctional family? I don't like that because somehow the family is functioning the best way that they can. Okay, so I like the word overwhelmed better. Because when people get in a situation where they got so much coming at them all the time, you do the best you can with what you got in life. I really believe that. And you grab whatever's going to work around you. It may not be the healthiest way of functioning, but when everybody gets overwhelmed in life, we all go back to what we know a lot of times right initially instead of getting what we need. Okay, so here's what happens when people get into a relationship with each other, okay? I'm gonna just take a typical, just a stereotypical family, okay? Let's say you have an addict or an alcoholic here, okay? And, Buddha said that you marry the mirror reflection of yourself. In other words, when you look in a mirror, the essence of you is the same, right? But the image is inverted. So what Buddha was saying was that victims marry abusers, addicts marry codependent, enabling people, okay? Victims marry rescuers, things like that. So when you're in any kind of a relationship, and it can also be a healthy thing too, like a more introverted, quiet person can marry a more outgoing person and they kind of pull each other. Like one person will pull the other person out of their shell, say, you gotta be more social. And then the less social person will say, you can't work so much and you gotta play sometimes. That can be a healthy thing, right? Okay, so you can marry the mirror reflection of yourself in a healthy way as well. But if you have wounded people getting together, that when you're in a relationship with anybody, there's always a connection between you. And the thing that connects you is your feelings and the energy that you have between you, okay? And we know that there's energy between us because, have you ever walked into a room and just known someone was pissed at you? They don't have to say a word, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can just walk up like let's say Eric's mad at me, right? And I walk up, hey Eric, whoa, what's going on, right? Because we have connection. And if Eric says nothing, like, you ever had anybody say that to you? Like if you're in a relationship, they go nothing, and you go, ooh, it feels even worse, right? Okay, and the reason is when you repress your feelings and push them down like this, they gotta go somewhere. And feelings are nothing more than energy. Emotions are energy. So if you think of emotion, energy in motion, emotion. And there's a basic law in physics that says you can't create or destroy energy, right? It only moves or changes its shape. So if they go nothing, or like I had a woman at one time in therapy with her husband, I said, wow, you are pissed, we get it. What's wrong? And she goes, nothing. And I said, no, really, there's something wrong. And then she pushed it down again and she says, if he loved me, he'd know. I said, oh, honey. I said, if you loved him, I said, first of all, if you loved him, you would tell him. If you loved him, you would tell him. But even more than that, if you loved yourself, you would tell him. Because who's not getting what she needs? You. So you're obviously getting something here by staying angry and pushing your feelings down. And the silent treatment is the worst thing you can do to a person. When people are fighting, at least you feel like they're engaged, right? When a person shuts down like this and does that, it's a form of abuse, almost. It borders on abuse to your partner. And that's what happens when they push that down and don't talk to you. It's got to go somewhere. So here's what happens, okay? Let's say you got an addict here. And one of the things, remember we talked, there's 3 rules in a dysfunctional or overwhelmed family. Don't trust, don't feel, and don't talk about it. The more addicted a family gets, the more they start to follow those rules. You can't trust because, like when I was practicing my addiction, like I didn't know what was going to happen that day. I knew I was going to be drunk or high before noon, but I didn't know what promises I was going to have to break to myself and to other people to make that happen. Especially late stage addiction, right? We all break promises with ourselves. You know, I'll say, oh, I'm not going to steal again. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to like get on the straight and narrow. So addiction makes you break your promises, so you can't trust even yourself. And then, you know, alcohol is the first anesthetic, right? You know, that used to knock people out before ether. And then they got other drugs, right, that they do it with. But alcohol is what they used to knock people out with. So it's an anesthetic. And all drugs are. Because all drugs, what's the number one reason people drink and use again? Remember we talked about it last week? What's that? To alter your mood, right? Alter your mood. Because we wouldn't pay the same for an ounce of oregano that we would for an ounce of weed, right? Okay. Or an ounce of wax for, you know, like for an ounce of rock. Right. Okay. So we're not going to pay the same. All right. So it alters our mood. That's the number one reason. So if you're not trusting, you're not feeling. So here's what happens. Let's say an addict is married to a codependent person. When the addict goes out and uses, they're pushing down their feelings, right? So the feelings have to go somewhere. When they push those down and use, and they go right over here into the codependent person. The codependent person, their tank is just as dirty as this person's over here. So if you think of yourself as a tank full of feelings, and so the way that they push their feelings down is to focus on you or the addict. And they react to the addict. That's how, so they get into enabling behaviors and they get into controlling behaviors. Okay? And enabling is doing something for the addict that they're supposed to be doing for themselves, or they need to be doing for themselves, you know, rescuing them. Okay? Calling in to work sick, paying the bills, doing the whatever, you know, bailing them out somehow. You know, it's like I had a guy that was 42 years old and still living at home and had never, ever had a job, had never washed his own clothes, made his own meals. And his mom had been divorced twice because she said, the men in her life said, you know what, you love him more than you love me. Like you have spent over, she had spent over $375,000 of her own money on all his legal bills since he was 16 years old. Okay, just to keep him out of prison, keep him out of jail, do whatever. And so she was in the family group and I sat there and I said, so that's enabling, that's rescuing him. I said, what's his motivation to get better if he knows you're always going to bail his ass out, right? Why would he have any motivation to get better? He always knows you're going to rescue him. And she said, I love my son. I just love him. Y'all don't love your children if you're not willing to help them. And I sat there and I went, wow, that is so selfish. That's all about you not feeling your pain. That's a healthy adult allows their children to feel their pain and make their mistakes so that they can learn from that. They don't rescue them from that. They say, you know, I remember when I was, teaching that, parents used to call up and go, I can't believe you gave my kid a D. And I said, no, your kid earned a D. Okay. Can he do extra credit? And I said, no, he can't do extra credit. He didn't even do the basics to get an A or get a B or whatever like that. So some kid who worked their butt off for an A gets to doesn't get rewarded for doing the work the first time, and this kid gets to come in and do extra credit to catch up because he was too lazy the first time. I said, that's not teaching him anything. No, he cannot do extra credit. And they get all mad at me. And I go, you're not helping your child. You are not helping your child. I didn't last too long as a teacher. Okay? Because you get a lot of pressure to pass kids on, and I just couldn't do that. I was like, can't do this job. Sorry, can't do this job. Can't just pass kids on and do that stuff to them, okay? So enabling is doing something for somebody they're supposed to be doing for themselves, need to be doing for themselves. Because we all do things for people that we love, right, and care about. We just do nice things. But when it keeps them from being a grown-up or taking responsibility, that's enabling. And that's what codependent people do, and they focus on you. They focus on you, And that's how they push down all their feelings.